I'd like to call to order the Lakewood City Council study session in the city of Lakewood, Colorado, June 19th, 2017 at 7:03 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul?
Here.
Goop?
Here.
Wickman? Gutwein? Here. Franks? Harrison? Here. Royball?
Here.
Vincent? Here. Abel?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Shakti?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Cool. Thanks. I'd like to welcome everybody out tonight for this study session on this beautiful evening, almost the beginning of summer. And while the clerk is going to grab the sign-in roster, our presentation tonight's going to be update on our sustainability plan. So that will be interesting. And then I'll open public comment. And just as a side note, public comment at study sessions is geared towards the actual presentation. And so you're more than welcome to speak before, but we'll also have it after if you'd rather listen to the presentation and chime in after as well. Okay, so I will read the list of folks who have signed up to speak prior, and it'll be 3 minutes. Just a reminder, the little box up here will be green till 2.5 minutes is up. It'll go yellow, and when your time is up at 3 minutes, it'll go red, and hopefully you'll stop, but if not, we'll gently move you on. Sandy, come on up. And if you did sign up and wish to speak after, you can do that as well.
Dear members of council, my name is Sandy Weathers, and I'm a resident of Ward 3. I'm also the co-founder of a nonprofit called Zero Waste Services. I serve on the board for the 3RC Foundation, which is a nonprofit that supports the Rooney Road Recycling Center, and I'm the chair of Waste and Recycling for Belmar Sustainable Neighborhood. I'm very passionate about waste and recycling, and that's what drives me to volunteer for this cause. My main concern, though, when it comes to trash is that it's going to become our legacy. 1,000 years from now, people are going to look at us and say, what were they thinking? We use a plastic fork just like this. We use it for 5 minutes and we throw it away. And this plastic fork is going to outlive us. It's going to last 100 years or more. So this is why I'm here today and why I wanted to speak to you, because I think the city as a whole has similar concerns. This is evident when you look at the sustainability plan and how they've incorporated the goal of 60% waste diversion by 2025. It makes me happy to see that we're on the right trajectory. However, what I worry about is us getting to that number of 60%. Right now, when you look at the national diversion rate, it's at 34%. But if you delve deeper and look at Colorado, Colorado for 2016, we're at 19.2%, and that's according to the CDPHE. What's really sad is that the year that the sustainability plan was published, the rate that was published that year for 2012 was 26.1%. So for the state, it's fallen. So you might remember a couple months ago I was here and I spoke to you about climate change goals. And something that I mentioned that day is that I always like to ask myself what I'm doing as an individual before I come to council and ask for something. So this issue isn't different. On a personal level, I like to consider myself an extreme recycler. I compost. I try to avoid buying new. When I do buy, I try to buy used. But because waste and recycling is so dear to me, I've taken it a step further. That's why I formed the nonprofit Zero Waste Services. I developed an online guide that tells people where to recycle things that are normally, that you can't put in single stream. Also, for the past 3 years, I've organized a repurposing rodeo where people can swap their items. If somebody doesn't want something anymore, they can trade with somebody else. And the current project I'm working on, I'm very excited about. It's with the Clements Center Sewing Group, and they are repurposing old t-shirts for us, and we're giving them out at the Lakewood Farmers Market, so that way people can avoid the use of plastic bags. So, although I feel I'm a champion for this cause, I think that as a community, we're still falling short and we can do more. I would like to ask that you join me and others like me to be a voice for our legacy and what we're leaving behind. I ask that the city help with marketing efforts that help explain and educate our efforts on why recycling is so important. I feel if people truly understand that trash doesn't go away, that it has long-lasting impacts to our environment, our land, our water, our air, that they'll begin to change their habits. So the right marketing campaign can have a powerful impact, and I wanted to show you something. I'm originally from Texas, and you guys might have seen this if you've ever been in Texas, but this campaign came out about 30 years ago. It's called Don't Mess with Texas. It's an anti-littering campaign, and I mean, when I started preparing this speech, this was the first thing that came into my mind because it was such a powerful message. And I remember as a kid, I'd walk with my friends and somebody would litter and they would get yelled at saying, "Don't mess with Texas," and they would pick up their trash. And I would love to see something similar to this here in Lakewood. I think it could drive these changes that we're looking for. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens? Good evening, welcome.
Hello, it's nice to see all of you. My name's Laura Stevens, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat tonight. And we're on the same page. You said a lot of really great things, and I'm here to also talk about recycling. I think one of the things that I think is important is to try and figure out how to bring it to more community level, kind of along lines that you were saying. And so I had just some ideas that I was trying to think about that might be helpful. I think as an HOA president and just surveying other people in the neighborhood that participate or don't participate in recycling, I think a lot of it has to do with expense. I think when you're living paycheck to paycheck, it makes it really difficult to want to pay the extra money to participate in a recycle program. And if you don't have a lot of time to make the time to drive to the Quail Center and do recycling. And so I think while it's admirable that there are people who want to go out and do the extra mile, we have to figure out how to make it infectious, that other people want to participate in it. And along the lines of your Texas campaign, that made me think of don't give a hoot, don't pollute. And I was trying to think if maybe we could try and pan off on something like that. And I was wondering if there was a way that somehow the money that we got from the Quail Recycling Center could be used as a kickback for Lakewood residents to somehow give some kind of help to encourage Lakewood residents to recycle. And along the same lines, it sounds like you have on your website a thing to let people know where it's easy for them to recycle. I know like Ace takes CFLs and Staples and Best Buy, you can return your computers for free. But maybe to try and publicize some of those things that are harder to recycle that merchants are already participating in would be a really great idea. And also just to try and make it more fun. I think if we had encouraged elementary kids to go and tour the facility on recycling, their enthusiasm is contagious. And I think if they go home and they will correct their parents about recycling. So anyway, I think our sustainability team does a great job, and I would like to offer any kind of support that we can. And I know I appreciate you signing the mayor climate commitment, which shows that you're interested in the leadership behind that. So thank you very much, and thanks for your time.
Great, thank you. I think Woodsy the Owl said that.
Oh, was it Woodsy?
I think so. Wasn't it Woodsy? Give a hoot, don't pollute.
Yes.
I don't know what Smokey the Bear said. You didn't know Woodsy?
She's too young.
We do need we need we need to recycle Woodsy for sure. Kira?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, Council. I am Kira Degree. I'm a candidate for Ward 1, and I am part of the South of 6th Sustainable Neighborhood. And I just wanted to thank all of you, as well as Travis and Jonathan, and the whole Sustainability Division for making sustainability a priority in Lakewood. One of the gifts of living in Colorado is our access to nature, and our city's devotion to keeping Lakewood beautiful and healthy for coming generations makes me proud to call it home. The Sustainable Neighborhood Program and the plan's emphasis on sustainability as it applies to public health and community are among the reasons that Lakewood feels so inclusive and forward-thinking. Although many things can be really contentious in government, I just want to thank all of you for coming together on such an important issue. Thanks.
Thank you. I can't read this. Adrian? All right, there we go. Come on down. Welcome.
I, too, do a lot of recycling and things like that. We pay for it. We pay the particular trash service, and we fill up a huge bin every 2 weeks. It's enormous. And then also, I recycle all the vegetable matter whenever I peel potatoes or things like that, and that goes immediately into the garden. So we work pretty hard at it, but I thought of something that I wanted to bring up, and that is, I know that restaurants have, the corn oil and things like that. And is there a program or something, I just want to put that out to the Sustainability Committee, is there a program where we could recycle oils and things like that? And the second thing I wanted to do is I wanted to compliment you on this particular thing here and working toward a resilient future. Now, I wanted to ask, as we're having more and more people moving into Lakewood, how can we get a resilient Lakewood if we have lots more people moving in? If we have a very high population, if we have lots of apartment people coming in, and in some of these places they don't even have close enough access to to public transit, which I would like to see. And then how does unlimited growth help out the ecosystems, the native species, the infrastructure, and the communities, and particularly the school system and the burden on that. How is that sustainable? It just makes it a whole lot more difficult to be sustainable if you have a huge glut of people moving in. And I really like this thing here, and we really do need to adapt to different changes and things like that. And I would like to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Trish Merkel. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Trish Merkel. I'm from Ward 2. I'm a candidate for City Council for Ward 2. I'm also a member of the ACIC Sustainability Committee. So I'm very pleased to be here this evening to show support for the sustainability plan. Thank you for the City Council that adopted the plan that many experts and residents got together and helped create. I appreciate that we come together tonight to celebrate what the accomplishments of the Sustainability Department has done for the City of Lakewood. I look forward to hearing Jonathan and Lynn's presentation and learning about the accomplishments that they have made. I think that it is a tall order for them in the plan for the sustainability, but there are many different elements that it holds within those pages. And all of us can support that sustainability plan in part or in whole, but I think that we can all agree that there are elements in there that we can agree upon. And recycling is certainly one of those that I think that we can make simpler and easier for the city. I think that we can provide services, perhaps having more recycle bins in public spaces would be beneficial. I think the city's done a fantastic job of providing recycling services at the community events, the zero waste events, and starting to add recycling bins at our parks and open spaces. I think I would like to see that be expanded so it's more available and accessible for people. And also, as this is a proclaimed year of the child, I would also like to see how we can bring those elements for education and get the children involved in a campaign of some sort that can help with increasing recycling awareness and increase our recycling for the city to meet the goals that are set within the sustainability plan. So thank you all for the opportunity.
Right, thank you. Dale, come on down. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Dale Trone. I'm from the Southern Gables Sustainable Neighborhood. I think in a few minutes, Jonathan's going to start talking about some of his metrics. It'll be water saved, it'll be other things. One thing, it looked like he's measuring bicycle paths in feet. I think we need to hear that metric in miles. I know that in other places we hear about how many roads are resurfaced in miles, so we need to work on that. Now, I want to change topics just slightly. One of the metrics in the sustainable neighborhoods that we don't see there is people. I need to give a little story here. I moved to Southern Gables 12 years ago. Our annual neighborhood association had 20 people show up, maybe 30 if we talked about coyotes. About 6 years ago, there's somebody named Jonathan that came and started talking to us about sustainability. Eyes lit up. Now let's fast forward to today. In the last year, Southern Gables neighborhood had probably thousands of people participate. Our monthly get-togethers have 20 or 30, and there's 2 different ones. We have our our leaf recycling that had hundreds of people participate. We have our own neighborhood night out. Near 600 people participated. From 20 to 30, 12 years ago, to thousands when we add up all the activities. Now, switching gears one more time for a little bit of the future. In 9 days will be Bicycle to Work Day. The Southern Gables neighborhood will be putting on a water station. I looked at the forecast. It's going to be above 90 degrees, and we're located at Buck's Barbecue at the top of Garrison Hill. I have a challenge for all of you to council, except for you, Barb, because I know you got an e-bike. I'd like you to start down at the Stone House and ride up Garrison Hill and then tell me that this is not the best bike to work station when you drink our cold water anywhere in the city. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming out. Barb, you should get out there. Put it to work. There you go. Mike Madison. Good evening, welcome.
Thanks for giving me the chance to say a few things here. I'm Mike Madison. I live in Ward 4, near Coyote Gulch Park. I'm a petroleum geologist and probably at odds with some of you folks here on a lot of issues, but not recycling. Aluminum cans put me through college. My dad worked in the metals recycling industry since the 70s, and I've been recycling and composting since I can't even remember. It's hard for me to fathom in this day and age how anyone could not recycle. I mean, waste reduction and recycling are very important to me, and I try to live what I preach. I mean, my family of 4, with a baby that still has diapers, we only produce 1 small can of garbage a week. That's because I recycle and I compost. And these things are really not that hard to do. They just take a little bit of time and just knowing about what you're doing. I mean, some people are kind of afraid to probably just pile a bunch of what seems like garbage in their backyard and have it break down naturally. But promise doesn't stink as long as you kind of turn it over every once in a while. But basically, just taking a few extra minutes and a few extra steps, you can meaningfully reduce the volume of trash. I mean, I go down my neighborhood every day of the week because there's a lot of haulers, but they have 96-gallon garbage cans everywhere and extra piles of stuff next to them. And I don't know if they just don't know what they're doing with it, or they just don't care, or they just aren't taking the time. But, you know, simple steps like composting and mulching your grass clippings instead of bagging them and throwing them away. I mean, you end up with good dirt for your garden and better organic material for your yard. So why waste time bagging that stuff and throwing away yard waste? Same goes for leaves. I mean, basically what I'm getting at here is really the things that we need to do with this is we've talked about all kinds of education programs and sustainability awareness and things. But one of the things that gets frustrating to me, and coming from suburban Chicago, we always had very good recycling programs going back, heck, as far as I can remember. But one of the things that it was you had incentives to recycle as well, not only just out of the goodness of your heart, but I mean, here, you either have to schlep all your stuff out to Quail or wherever, and those are limited hours and overflowing bins half the time. I tried it for a while, and it just wasn't able to do it with kids and things, so I ended up just paying for it through my waste hauler. But you have the same basic plan with all these waste haulers. It's unlimited garbage for a set fee. So why would anybody that didn't morally want to believe in recycling or philosophically want to do it recycle? Let's pay extra to do it when I can already throw everything away. So basically, just as a community, if we're going to take sustainability seriously, we must focus not only on awareness, but incentives to reduce that waste in order to protect our finite resources, which includes just holes that we want to fill with just unlimited garbage. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Levon? Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Levon Welchel, and I live in the Southern Gables community, and I am part of the sustainability group. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of implementing a marketing campaign to increase voluntary recycling in Lakewood. And my motivations, honestly, are twofold. Honestly, I'm really troubled by the amount of litter that I see in our parks, our open spaces, our neighborhood streets, and our roadways. And I've lived in Lakewood for many years, and I see our city as being really one of the truly great places to live in the metro area. And I feel like if we had a marketing campaign and we were focused more on the recycling end of things, I think it would raise awareness and have a side benefit of also reducing littering. You know, it's one of the things that if you focus on something, it tends to improve. Whenever you measure anything, the act of measuring it actually causes the improvement more than, you know, anything that you can do as far as changes. And I really do think we'd see a twofold improvement there with the litter issue. I also know that when you're able to reach people either through, you know, learning opportunities or just making it easier to do the right thing, you're more likely to make a lasting impact. And as an example, I'm going to completely age and date myself here, but when I was a kid, there was a TV ad that featured a Native American Indian, and he was, looking at different scenes of litter and pollution and that sort of thing. And in the very end of the commercial, they zeroed in on him, and he just had a single tear running down his face, and that had a tremendous impact on me. As a child, and also all of my compatriots. Just like the Texas example, you know, we watched each other, we stayed on each other, and even as adults, I know as an adult, it's, you know, something I think about, and it had a really positive effect on me. And I think really when we think about it, our youngest citizens are often our strongest change agents. I would like to see us focus on recycling with an emphasis on the R, the reduce R, being, the first and the foremost one. But I do think that doing that will logically result in overall less littering. So I think it would have a twofold benefit and impact for us. Since Colorado only recycles 12% statewide, and a statistic that I've read is that 70% of our trash really is recyclable, I do feel like we have a lot of opportunity. We can make some big gains. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. David Cisney? I think I butchered that. My apologies. Welcome. It's nice to see you.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Cisney. I am a resident of Ward 5. It's actually my first city council meeting. But when I heard that you were going to be talking about the sustainability plan, I just wanted to come out and add my voice to the chorus of people who have expressed support for the sustainability plan and efforts to promote recycling and just efforts along those lines. As a parent of two small but knowledgeable children who ask a lot of questions, I've been having a lot of trouble over the last 6 months explaining a lot of the decisions that our federal government has been making with regards to decisions about our environment, our air quality, water quality, and the quality of our land. And personally, I would like to be able to offer examples of leaders on the local level who are willing to make small sacrifices today so that their lives can be better in the future. And I think that it's important to make those choices now when it's easier than it will be 20 years from now. And I think that the best way for this council to set a good example, the kind of example that I'm looking for, would be to continue efforts to further and more successfully implement the sustainability plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. David? Good evening.
Hi, I'm Dave from Ward 5. And Mike, you're not alone. I am also in the oil and gas industry and also a member of Sustainable Southern Gables in Ward 5. And I want to thank the city and council for supporting a bright and beautiful future for Lakewood. I am so proud to call Lakewood home for my family and myself because the city values making this community better for all. The sustainability plan to me is proof of Lakewood's commitment to that. One thing this document does that is amazing is how it values statistics and data to determine success. And you can see that throughout the whole entire document. One thing we have to note is that we have an amazing staff here at Lakewood that tirelessly work on this. And I just want to thank our public servants in the sustainability department for everything that they do. I also want to just encourage Lakewood to continue our progress towards a better future by prioritizing our citywide energy makeup, increasing waste diversion, encouraging alternative energy, and conserving our finite resources. I hope it is known how important these causes are to every demographic, every age group, and every religion of the citizens of Lakewood. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on the front side? If not, we can open it up on the back side. Mr. Tyler, come on down. You wore your green.
Wearing my green. And I promise I'm not going to come every single week, but you hit a hot button for me this week. Max Tyler, resident of Lakewood for the last 30 years in Two Creeks area. And sustainability is a big issue for me. I chaired the Transportation and Energy Committee in the House for 4 years, was on it for 8 years. But the fact that we're changing the climate with carbon pollution, I think, is a real issue. It's really an existential issue for our civilization. You know, there was a poll that came out a little over a year ago. 56% of the people responding said the climate's changing, we're causing it, it's a problem, and we have to work to fix it. 56% you say, yeah, no big deal, you know? That poll was a national poll run by a Republican polling firm of very conservative Republican voters. Now that tells you how the world is changing and people understanding that science is virtually 100% certain about what's going on here. It's middle school physics, ladies and gentlemen, is why the climate is warming. But I want to talk a little bit about transportation as part of that. I see that one of the goals is a decrease in 8% in Lakewood, an decrease in 10% in Lakewood of vehicle miles traveled, and we're down to 8% already. Now, VMT overall in the West and in Colorado started dropping before the financial crash caused by the banks. And it is still dropping on a per capita basis. Millennials aren't buying cars, so actual traffic is going down. As a matter of fact, one of the local traffic engineers was telling me that one section of road, Union Boulevard between 6th Avenue and Alameda, where everybody says, oh my God, the traffic is terrible. The counts in 2001 are exactly, within a couple hundred cars, the same as 2016. Doesn't mean we don't have to do something here. But what we're doing is going to be different. And when you're looking at sustainability, you need to look to the future and see what things are going to be like. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. I think it was last fall, there was a Budweiser semi-truck of beer going from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. Well, I talked to the backup driver of that truck. And he said, you know, that truck did a lot better than I could. The reason he was a backup driver, that he never touched the wheel. It was a fully autonomous truck going down the road without a driver in the driver's seat in Colorado. Last week, there was a presentation by a guy by the name of Tony Sipa, who's a futurist and looks at disruption issues and such like that. He says, and I don't know if I believe this, but you can see where the trend is going, that in 10 years, he's insistent that 95% of the auto fleet will be replaced by electric vehicles, and 40% of that will be autonomous vehicles. That's going to change how we get around, for sure. As a matter of fact, this fall, University of Denver is going to have autonomous people movers going all over their campus, across Evans, across Jewell, across the university. That's going to be implemented this fall, according to one of your local traffic engineers, from what I was told. Pretty interesting. You think about Union Boulevard, and what a great place for a people mover. You know, when you have more connected vehicles, more autonomous vehicles, you can narrow the lanes a little bit, put a little lane off on the side, and have a people mover moving between restaurants, sources of work, and sources of living, and sources of play. Think about that when you're looking at your transportation needs, because this is really going to change. We have to look at that because our transportation budget in the state of Colorado for expansion is pretty darn close to zero. Zero. We have to be smarter about this. That's what they're doing on I-70 East. They've taken 2 lanes out of the long-term planning on that, and they're putting in a managed lane, which will cut traffic, but they're also planning on restriping lanes and perhaps putting in lanes for connected vehicles. Check out Road X at CDOT and see what they're doing in terms of smarter approaches to transportation. We're cutting our vehicle miles traveled. We don't have to give as much to highways as we used to. CDOT, whenever they are doing expansion, is always doing complete streets. They're always putting in 10-foot sidewalks for pedestrian and bicycle use. Downtown Denver, you know how many people commute to downtown Denver? And I'll finish it up. Thank you. It says, I'll stop. By golly, I should do that. Anyway, 60% of the people that work in downtown Denver get there by transit or carpooling or walking or biking. 60%. That can happen in Lakewood. We can plan for that future. We can encourage that future. And thanks for the 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 4 minutes extra.
20 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Alex, come on down. Good evening. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to address the issues of sustainability in our city. And I feel like lately a lot of people have been perhaps misusing the term sustainability in a way. What a lot of people in Colorado, and not just Lakewood, still do not seem to fully grasp is that the true sustainability is a way of life, and most U.S. cities, if any, do not have that way of life in their core when it comes to how those cities are planned and developed. To be sustainable, a city needs to have, To be sustainable, a city needs to have a transportation network that can sustainably carry the majority of its citizens to work, daily chores, and entertainment without stressing the environment and overloading the system. Yet lately, more and more high-density developments are being forced through without the infrastructure to support them. City needs to have a stable water supply and also a comprehensive program for recycling of the water and reducing the water usage. And to see how much some of the developers care about the water conservation, head over to any number of new and recent developments such as Highlands Ranch, which is having to drill deeper and deeper into their aquifer, and which now may not have a chance to replenish in any time soon. And during the course of various meetings, you have also heard that Lakewood Police Force has been stretched thin. So it's another valuable community resources that has been stretched thin. How is that going to be more sustainable as more and more people need to be serviced by the police? West Metro is another source that right now seems to be, plenty of supply, but what happens next time there's a Hayman fire or something that they need to go help? Some will state that the citizens of Lakewood and more parts of Colorado do not want development, and that is simply not true. What we want is a development that brings value and true sustainability. Having safe and well-connected bike paths is something that is of value and is sustainable. And yet, since we've moved to Lakewood in 2012, I've seen almost no progress in improving the safety of those who want to bike on the pavement around the Green Mountain. But in the meantime, Alameda has been widened in order to support the future wasteful development being pushed through around the 470 in Alameda by developers who do not even live in the city, and in some cases, they don't even live in the county. So Solterra is just a preview of what sustainable development means to a developer. Squeeze as many homes per acre as possible, no wildlife corridor, no parks, no small grocery stores or medical clinics that people can walk to. And where's the train station sitting on the train line parallel to 470 to again sustainably carry the increasing number of people the developers are trying to shove onto any remaining lot on this side of the valley? Where are the solar panels on each roof in Solterra? A developer's idea for value was building boutique shops, as stated during a hearing in Jefferson County during the rezoning attempt near the Dinosaur Ridge. What does that even mean? And besides showing how far some of the business and governance entities are detached from the realities of the 21st century. How about building us a makerspace, a medium-scale prototyping facility to collaborate with NREL on the next generation techniques for water conservation and energy production and conservation? That would be of value and support sustainability in the form of providing well-paying jobs and providing research for energy security and independence to move us into the future. So it's becoming obvious that some of the land use and some of the development tactics in Colorado are still deeply steeped in traditions from decades ago. Yet someone in marketing has figured out if you slap sustainability on it, people will fall for it some of the time. So we urge you to truly slow down and take the time to figure out what will truly make the city sustainable and healthy for decades, if not centuries to come, rather than just allowing developers who do not care about anything but profit ruin this great land and leave the future generations to deal with this mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment and move on to our presentation. Do you want to wait till after, or are you going to hang out for the whole presentation? Okay. Good evening.
Hello, Mayor, City Council members. I'm glad we're talking about sustainability. I was flipping through your plan, which looks good, and on page 13, it talks about 2025 target of reducing community greenhouse gas emissions by 20%. And we don't really, at this time that I can tell, have public transportation system except for light rail and some bus lines, but not where some of these developments are being planned. So I'm very concerned because it seems like we're moving away from the target if we put in development that would increase gas emissions. And if we're planning a development that might put 10 or 12,000 more cars on the road, we need to think carefully because we do want to be sustainable. You know, we moved here to have good quality of life in Lakewood. So I would like to definitely support a moratorium on future development, and I would like to ask the City Council to definitely consider that until we can figure out how we can put public transportation in place for some of these newer places, and figure out if other things can be done too, such as expanding the schools. So I think that's worth considering.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's get our presentation going. I will call up, looks like Jonathan Martel. Good evening. Big night.
Yeah, after I get done blushing from a couple of those comments, we'll get going here. Mayor and City Council, Jonathan Wachtel, Sustainability Manager in the Planning Department. And tonight, I just want to thank you for the time to allow us to give you an update on our implementation progress towards for the 2015 Sustainability Plan. What you're going to hear tonight is a lot of really positive stories about efforts that we've gotten underway, and it's really reflecting of really big growth across the entire organization of cooperative efforts to integrate sustainability into operations and into programs. And so when the recognition comes to the Sustainability Division, as we just heard, I just want to make sure to pass that along to departments across the city that are all participating in all of these efforts. We were here not too long ago. We were here for the Sustainability Awards and recognized leadership in the community. And then earlier, that was in early May, in April we were here and we gave you an update, which might seem a little bit similar to tonight. But in April, really, there were a handful of timely issues and projects and some data we wanted to make sure to get in front of you. So you were informed since things were taking place, building the Energy Resource Center and the results of the residential waste survey. Tonight's going to be a little different. Tonight we're going to highlight what's taken place in the last year, 2016 and the first part of 2017. And then, use that as an opportunity to not only update you on progress, but talk a little bit about trends, things that we're learning as we go through this. This is an evolving effort for the city. We're only 4 years old as a division and as a function here at the city, so we're learning as we go. And so to start, I want to talk a little bit about the metrics that we've heard are really critical to this plan. We use data to do our best to inform our decision making and to measure our progress towards implementation. So I want to talk for a minute about that. Then I want to give you just a brief update on climate trends. That's part of our commitment to you when we came back each year, was to give you updates and trends related to the plan. And then I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Coppage, who's going to come up and give you the highlights of the implementation for the year, and then we'll be happy to field your questions. So a note on metric-based plans. As far as we know, this has really been the first adopted City of Lakewood plan that leans heavily on measurable targets, along with that accompany the goal statements from the community. And that's really beneficial because we're able to track progress and really measure where we're going. At the same time, we're learning some things as we go through that. And there are some challenges with metric-based plans. So as all of you received your council packet, and the appendix to that packet had this year's update with lots of metrics. And I know for a lot of you, that's an area you like to dig into. And that's also then included in the back of the full update document. You may have wondered why maybe there were some gaps in the data and there wasn't new data there, or why there was a significant change between the previous year we reported and the new one. And part of that is because we're finding that, with 35 measurable targets and 90 sustainability indicators, as you can imagine, most of that data is coming from outside sources. And so as we go to different entities to collect that data, we find oftentimes that it's not available every year. We have to wait till the next time they update it, or that maybe the data looks so significantly different than the year before that we need to spend some time trying to understand why that is. One of those reasons that things may be different is also methodology changes. When we went to do our greenhouse gas emission inventory update using 2015 data, the last time the city had done that, and the first time was 2007. Well, as you can imagine, a lot has happened between 2007 and 2015, standardizing how cities go about measuring these things. It's very complex, and so the methodology changed. In that case, for the most part, we were able to go back and revisit the first assessment using the updated methodology and still end up with apples to apples. In other cases, an example might be an indicator we have in the plan is to look at bicycle counts. Well, it's not a flaw in the data, but if one year you do bicycle counts in one location and the next year you do them somewhere else, it's hard to compare those two data points. Or other times, methodology changes significantly and it's not our data and it's hard to go back and justify it. So we just wanted to share that, and our commitment to you really is that we're documenting all those things so that when we come back to you and update these, when you have questions and things don't match, we're noting all of that, and our commitment to you is that we'll do our best to make sure we get meaningful data that relates as best as possible to Lakewood whenever we can, and that will be transparent all the way through. So moving on, a little update on climate year to year here. These are some data points that we've shared in the past with you. Last year we shared carbon dioxide atmospheric levels from March of 2016. So you can see the data from this year in March of 2017. That continues to increase. This is global, and I'll bring it down to Lakewood here momentarily. Temperature increase across the globe continues to rise as well. This is the numbers there on the right. In 2015, 1.56 degrees Fahrenheit. That's an increase in average global temperature over historic historic averages. And now in 2016, we're looking at an increase of 1.69 degrees Fahrenheit. In 2016, we once again globally set a record for the warmest year on record. That's out of the 137-year series of record keeping from NOAA. And that's the third straight year that we've broken records. And 5 of those records have been broken since 2005. It was a North American continental record in 2016 for total land temperature. And the contiguous United States had the second warmest year on record. And every state in the lower 48 had above average temperatures in 2016. So what does that mean for Colorado? Well, we're 2 degrees warmer on average. We don't have updated data from last year, but this is from the best studies that we have. Colorado's temperature has increased by 2 degrees over the past 30 years. And when they run the climate models, they put in various scenarios of what happens if we reduce emissions immediately and aggressively, what happens if we wait a little while, what happens if we don't do anything. And so under a medium emissions scenario, meaning we can slowly reduce our emissions, the projections show an increase in 2.5 to 5 degrees by mid-century. More specifically, I do have updates on this related to heat. The Rocky Mountain Climate Organization and the City and County of Denver's Department of Public Health released a study just last week that looked at the potential for future extreme heat events in the Denver metro area. I think last year we talked a little, brought you an update on a study that was done in Fort Collins with 90-plus degree days. That was from a few years ago and really showed that it almost had doubled between 2000 and 2010 compared to historic. This looked at even what's going to happen into the future with different models, and so I think one of the takeaways here is that if we go ahead with business as usual and we don't reduce our emissions, when we get towards middle of this century, the average high in Denver in July is going to be approximately 94 degrees on an average day. And to put that into some perspective, that's 2 degrees hotter than the average temperature between 1970 and 2000 in El Paso, Texas. So you can almost picture on a map the transition that the Denver metro area and the city of Lakewood's climate is going to be similar to El Paso, Texas. So that's the kind of shifts we're talking about. And so before I turn it over to Lynn to talk about all the good stuff that's happening, I know these are big, less excited, less happy topics, is realizing that there are risks that come with these changes. And we don't know exactly what that means for Lakewood. We know that in Colorado, the best studies show that we can expect increases in extreme heat days, that we can expect increases of extreme weather events. And given our experience here just a month or so ago, we know that even short events can have a significant impact, maybe unexpected and beyond maybe what we'd even imagine, just from individual events. So that's something we definitely need to be thinking about. Precipitation, the models actually vary. They don't really show whether we're going to end up with more precipitation or less precipitation, but one thing that is really becoming evident is that we'll have decreased stream flows because our snowpack, the rapid increase in temperature in the earlier spring is melting our snowpack faster. So we're losing stream flows. you know, it's other health impacts are something we really need to think about too. If we have more wildfires, which are projected, there's air quality issues, there's public health issues, there's pest related outbreaks for our vegetation, for our trees. Public health can be a significantly impact. So the point of bringing all this up is that we've talked a lot about in the past about reducing our emissions, and we've really kind of had that at the front, and we've said, hey, we assessed the whole plan when we brought it forward for adoption and said, if we implement all this, what kind of emission reductions might we be able to achieve? And that's how we set our 20% reduction target. It was very methodical and carefully established. What we mentioned in the plan but haven't really rolled up our sleeves on yet is understanding the risks that we might be presented with as a community as a result of changes in climate. And that's the risks to individuals, to households, to our community as a whole, to our businesses, our economic system, to our transportation and our infrastructure. And then identifying the measures necessary so that we can address those and prepare ourselves to make sure we have long-term resilience and sustainability in the most holistic sense of that word, sustainability. And so I bring this up because I want to initiate the conversation and let you know this is where some of our efforts are going to be heading in later this year and into 2018 to really start wrapping our heads around how do you go about a robust resiliency planning process, and that we'll be rolling up our sleeves to really dig in and see what that looks like for the city of Lakewood. This kind of just summarizes those two pieces I was talking about, so I won't beat the dead horse, but you can see the idea of reducing the emissions and then getting ready to adjust for future impacts. And if we do those together and we put on our adaptation hats and our innovation, and we move forward, we can make sure we have a resilient Lakewood. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn. She's going to talk to you about the 35 targets and the 90 indicators and the 63 direct plan strategies and how we're doing and all the effort from across the organization and across the community that's gone into this year's efforts. So I'll turn it over to her, and when we're done, we'll field your questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good evening, Lynn. Welcome.
Good evening. All right. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Lynn Coppage. I am a Senior Sustainability Planner in the Planning Department. As mentioned earlier, the reason we're here tonight is because as staff, we committed to providing an annual update during the Sustainability Plan adoption process to provide a report on those targets, indicators, and 63 implementation strategies. The annual report this year also highlights projects across the city and community that have contributed to the Sustainability Plan goals. And as a note, the report and this presentation tonight is not intended in any way to be comprehensive of every project that achieves these goals. There's a vast number happening across the city, as we've heard even just this evening. So tonight I will walk through each of the 7 chapters and provide just a brief topic overview. Then I'll switch to a few project highlights that are happening around the city, and then end with a few 1 or 2 key metrics that we really want to highlight tonight. And then we'll be able to take your questions. The first chapter of the Sustainability Plan is around climate change and adaptation. So as Jonathan mentioned, this means mitigation, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and adaptation, preparing for and adapting to the impacts that climate change is bringing with it. And in this chapter, there are 4 strategies identified, and 3 are already initiated. To set the stage a little bit, I want to talk about the targets in this chapter. And these targets can really be thought of as overarching targets for the entire plan. So I'll kind of draw your attention to this graph to start with. The first data point right here is our baseline that we set with using 2007 data for greenhouse gas emissions citywide. The second data point is the update, the 2015 update that Jonathan referred to, and that I'll dive into a little bit deeper in a few slides. And then if you follow the dotted line, that's our projected targets, if we're going to reach our targets. The first is a 20% reduction in community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. And this target was informed by those strategy assessments and calculators that you might have remembered beforehand. That really demonstrated that if the plan was fully implemented, that this was really a feasible target that Lakewood could get to as a community by 2025. And then that last data point is the 2050 target. This is our only long-term target in the plan. The rest of it is a 10-year plan, but it really just demonstrates the commitment that the community set to not stopping in 2025, but continuing on to 2050 and making progress. So those are our local commitments, our local targets. In addition, we are part of regional, national, and international networks that are committed to building that resiliency on local levels. And the importance of these networks really is creating a supportive group of local leaders that can share best practices and address challenges together of these really large issues, such as how do we measure these greenhouse gas emissions, how do we adapt for an actively changing climate and prepare for a really strong future. So as we are part of these organizations and are learning best practices, one really great example is measuring greenhouse gas emissions. This is a really difficult and big problem, as you can't say, draw a line around your city and say greenhouse gas emissions stop there. What we produce is what we produce. There's a lot of cross-boundary emissions, and so that makes it a little bit difficult, but there's been a lot of standardization and progress. And so with that, we have done a greenhouse gas emissions inventory update. And overall, just comparing 2015 to 2007 data, the overall result was a 2% reduction. And we can pretty confidently say that that's largely attributed to our buildings emissions sector. And that's a result of our energy sources getting a little bit cleaner. That feeds into the entire grid and affects our entire city of where that energy that we're using is actually generated. So there was an increase in renewables and cleaner fuels resulting in that 11% decrease. Transportation emissions also fell by 6%. And we think that can be attributed to more efficient fuel standards that were rolled out nationwide, as well as the opening of the W line. And then the last sector is waste and consumption-based emissions. And there was an increase in this sector, which we view as really as an opportunity to inform how we move forward and address and opportunities to reduce our emissions in this sector. So the second chapter is energy, water, and the built environment, and this focuses on goals around providing everyone access to affordable and renewable energy, increasing energy and water efficiency in our buildings and sites, and developing sites that really do support community health and community cohesion and protect our natural environment. Of the 11 strategies that were outlined in this chapter, 7 have been initiated. The first one you heard about in April. We talked about the Energy and Water Resource Center, which provides resources such as educational materials, financing mechanisms, just all a broad spectrum of resources for residents and homeowners to make improvements on their properties. And this is an ongoing strategy, so we're continuing to build and grow as we learn. And I encourage you all to explore the Energy and Water Resource Center a little further by going to lakewood.org/energy. The second project that I'd like to highlight tonight really demonstrates leadership from our city organization and city staff. Earlier this year, we partnered with the Colorado Energy Office to explore energy performance contracting on our facilities. And this program recognizes that facility improvements are inevitable in any property, and it leverages the future cost savings from making improvements today in order to finance improvements that will result in utility cost savings by reducing energy and water consumption, investing in renewables, and increasing occupancy comfort. So really, hitting that triple bottom line. And that addresses, and there are actually over 200 projects across the state that have already gone through this process, representing over 150 clients, which is cities, school districts, library districts. And so it really is a proven program. And that addresses existing buildings. So another opportunity that we've identified is for new development. We recognize that with new development, if you design it properly and do smart and efficient design, you can really reap that triple bottom line benefits. And with this in mind, Sustainability Division partnered with the Public Works Department earlier this year to start incorporating sustainability considerations into the building code update. So we continue to work with them to do that. In addition, a really great model development of sustainability is the Cityscape in Belmar, which was a Sustainability Award winner, if you remember from earlier this year. The development features, highly resource-efficient design, access to multimodal transportation, and really strong community amenities such as a community garden and plaza space. And so all of that while providing the community around it with increased value. And so the looking at these standards with the building code and recognition and using good examples of good development are two of the ways that we can increase sustainable development throughout Lakewood. But some other options are looking at site plan, when we look at site plan and review that for sustainability considerations, benchmarking policies, using sustainability assessments on certain projects. So there's a lot of different ways that we can move forward and ensure that as we build in Lakewood, we really are considering that triple bottom line. One of the key targets for this chapter is increasing our energy from renewable sources. The target for this for 2025 is 45%, and when this was set, we were using the 2010 baseline of 12% from renewables. And if you looked in that plan, we're now at 29%. So there's quite a big jump from 2010 to 2016, which is very exciting. A lot of movement in this area. However, a word of caution with a lot of these metrics is, what caused that growth? And with this one, that's tied very closely to a state renewable portfolio standard, which requires all investor-owned utilities to achieve or to generate 30% of their energy mix from renewables by 2030. So we're getting to that kind of that cusp, that 30% cusp with the 29% in 2016. And so as a community, if we want to go past that 30% that's required by state law and achieve our 45% target by 2025, we're going to have to continue to collaborate with our utility and other stakeholders around the area, like other municipalities. Just keeping that in mind as we move forward. All right. Chapter 3 is sustainable economy. So this really focuses on local business, generating local food, ensuring that households are able to meet their basic needs, workforce development, and providing education. And in this chapter, 3 strategies have been initiated so far. One of the newest projects that we're excited to unroll for you tonight, we mentioned in our April update, is the Best for Colorado Challenge. And this program is a partnership between Lakewood and the B-Lab Corporation or organization, which is a nonprofit organization that certifies countries across the globe that are achieving the highest standards for environmental and social practices and accountability. And it's certified thousands, including New Belgium Brewery, Patagonia, Etsy. It's a pretty impressive program. And so the Best for Colorado program kind of brings it down to a local level and is providing Colorado businesses with quick and free assessment and pathway to participate in a simplified version of that same certification process. So by participating, businesses can benchmark and improve their community impacts, or the positive community impacts that they have on the community. They can retain and attract employees that have values that align with their mission, and they can share their story with a broader audience. So all benefits to those businesses while helping Lakewood achieve its goals. So it really is that kind of win-win. And it's available for all Lakewood businesses right now, free of charge, through November, that free assessment period. And so we'd be more than happy to give you some postcards to hand out to businesses as you move about the community. And you can also send them to bestforco.com, where they'll be able to kind of get walked through and get those resources. Another area where there's been a lot of activity is around local food. I'm sure you've heard a lot about our community farms, community gardens, farmers markets, what's happening in people's backyards. And so as a response, the planning department last year created a local foods page to kind of gather that information, provide instructions on getting permits for small animals, chickens, apiaries, listing out farmers markets and other ways that people can get involved with the local food scene. And you can explore that at lakewood.org/localfood. One of the key metrics that we wanted to bring out in this chapter is represents how we measure progress towards creating self-sufficient households that can meet all their basic needs. So this was identified through the sustainability plan process as a really good way to track that progress, and it is to increase the number of households earning incomes above the living wage, so being able to meet their basic needs And this standard was developed by and maintained by MIT, and it accounts for basic needs such as food, healthcare, transportation, housing, childcare, kind of everything you kind of need to live, and it also accounts for geographic variation. So it's a pretty good metric to use. And so as we were collecting data this past year, one of our indicators is median household income, and what we found was that from 2010, the baseline, to 2015, which was the most current data, although there was a 8% increase in household income, there was actually a 5% decrease in the number of households that were earning above that living wage. So this represents a trend that most of us are probably familiar with, that wages are not always keeping up with the cost of living here. So that's something we'll continue to track. The next chapter is zero waste, and just as a quick refresher, zero waste is a shift in the way that we approach materials. So instead of a one-way route from extraction to the landfill, this mimics nature's cyclical process where it uses resources and repurposes them and gives them new life in all areas. So for instance, upstream, how we design our products. I know we've all had those pesky packaging that you can't do anything with it because that's a cardboard attached to plastic or attached to paper. So we really have to think about how we can actually design our products so that we can reuse them later in that midstream, give repurpose and reuse, all those creative ways that you can give products new life, such as changing t-shirts into farmers market bags. And then downstream, recycling and composting to give the products new life and just feed it right back into that loop. And this approach is also important because Lakewood does care. We receive inquiries about zero waste, recycling, and other resource recovery activities more than any other topic. And zero waste efforts are also highly visible. So zero waste events, containers in the parks, every day in our neighborhoods. And it's a great way to engage with the community around sustainability and take action to grow the economy and those industries as well. So the goals for this chapter is expanding that zero waste culture through our entire community, through our municipal, in our municipal facilities and events, and also to improve household and commercial waste management. And of the 12 strategies, 10 have been initiated. So 2016 was full of stories of success and leadership and partnership across the city organization. Cider Days continued to amaze us, achieving a 90% diversion rate. And those are a couple of the volunteers with their homemade aprons from old feed bags, as you can see. Just to kind of put that 90% in perspective, so that means 90% of the waste that was generated from the two-day event did not go to the landfill. Over 8,000 pounds were composted, over 1,000 were recycled, and only 1,000 were landfilled. It's incredibly impressive, especially when you're looking at what they're sorting. And that does include turkey legs. I just want to throw that out there. Other exciting activities was compost collection was expanded to our golf course restaurants and back of house. It's been going very well thanks to the staff there. Recycling expanded to several different Head Start sites and in our parks. Compost classes were added at the Heritage Center and in partnership with some of our community partners such as Ute Trail Community Gardens, Sprout City Farms, and record volumes were recorded. I don't know if you noticed this in the appendix at Quail Street and Rooney Road Recycling Centers. So you can see the demand continues to increase and people continue to want to dispose of their materials properly to give it a new life. And the city continued to provide community cleanups for a variety of products, including prescription drug take-back day, shred day, yard waste, and cooking oil, which I think was mentioned before. Quail Street Recycling Center does take cooking oil, Christmas tree lights, and all of the above. As we covered in April, city staff did look into begin researching understanding our residential waste system and conducted a community trash and recycling survey. And that's available online, as well as some other information at lakewood.org/residential trash. And then the key metric for this target is around diversion rates. And that's a way that we can measure what's not going to the landfill. So the target is to increase our community-wide diversion, and that includes residents, businesses, our own city facilities to that 60% by 2025. And just to take a little step back and refer to what Jonathan was saying about data availability, this one is another one that we're constantly looking for data that is reliable and that is as most relevant to Lakewood as we can get. And so you might have heard two different diversion rates earlier this evening. And what we are using this evening is from the CDPHE, the Colorado State's average diversion rates. The 19% is included with scrap metal recycling, and that comes from a lot of industrial processes that may happen elsewhere in the state, but in Lakewood there's not as much, and so we used the number that excludes scrap metal recycling, and that's that 12%. And so if you look at this chart, it shows the diversion rate starting in 2010 up to 2016, and you can see there's only been a little bit of growth. And so as of now, we are not on target to achieve that 60% target. Right. The next chapter is community cohesion and public health. This focuses on building social networks, promoting healthy and active living, providing supportive services for folks across the city. And of the 14 strategies, 13 have been initiated. Always an exciting program to talk about, the Sustainable Neighborhood Stats. You'd think I would know that, it's in my division. 71 initiatives happened this past year that involved 1,600 participants, and all 5 of our neighborhoods were recertified as outstanding sustainable neighborhoods. To date, the overall program stats include 300 initiatives across the city, engaging more than 5,000 participants. And we continue to grow. 3 new sustainable neighborhoods were added in the Green Mountain, Applewood, and Morse Park neighborhoods, and we look forward to adding their stats next year. The Art Line was launched this year. I'm sure you've heard a little bit about that, and that's a really exciting program because it achieves multiple of our sustainability goals, including building that community cohesion, getting people out and about walking and biking, and promoting our local economy in the 40 West District. So that's a 4-mile arts loop. Arts are walking and biking experience, and so we're very excited to see that grow. And it also achieves our goals around incorporating the dynamic between, or improving the dynamic between sustainability and public art, and really making that connection evident. Some more programs that are achieving multiple goals in this chapter are providing recreation services for all ages and abilities. So if you weren't aware, Carmody Park, Lakewood's first universally accessible park, officially opened today, allowing folks of all ages and abilities, yep, little jazz hands, folks of all ages and abilities to play together. Lakewood Possibilities Funds expanded in 2016. And if I get my stats correct, it provided scholarships for income-eligible residents to enjoy city programs and facilities, and serves 200 families, including 400 children, to access swimming lessons, art classes, gymnastics, and other city programs and services. And then the Lunchbox Express program also expanded in 2016 and provided, in partnership with Jewish Family Services, 3,000 lunches to those who may not otherwise have had access to food during the day. It's a lot of great news. There are multiple targets in this chapter, but we wanted to highlight a few community engagement targets because these were some impressive numbers. So in just 1 year, not since our baseline, but just since 2015 and 2016, a 45% increase, that's nearly double, in subscriptions to all city newsletters. So Friday Report, Sustainability, Economic Development, all of the above. So a lot of people are starting to really engage. And again, 5 certified outstanding sustainable neighborhoods, moving toward our target, which is 12 outstanding sustainable neighborhoods by 2025. So we're hoping those extra 3 come in handy. And then an increase in our admissions to recreation centers and pools and admissions. So you know that we're really engaging the community and inviting them and fulfilling Lakewood's inclusive mission. Chapter 6, Natural Systems, talks about protecting biodiversity, landscapes or land stewardship, and using ecosystem services to adapt to climate change impacts such as tree canopy coverage, stormwater management. And of the 7 strategies in this chapter, 6 have been initiated. One of the topics that came up repeatedly through the sustainability planning process was reducing chemical use on landscapes. Maintaining high-quality facilities and meeting state requirements to control noxious weeds while protecting our environment and community health can sometimes conflict and create a challenge. In the sustainability plan, a strategy was identified to pilot some of that alternative using alternative pest management on our park sites, and this year that's exactly what our park staff is doing at a few of their different sites. One example is a small herd of goats at the William Frederick Hayden Park and Green Mountain to control noxious weeds. And then these efforts are being supplemented by the community. The Be Safe initiative, which you might have heard about us talk about last year, has spread to over 100 households that have pledged to protecting their yards and making it pollinator safe. And then you might have seen also the Be Safe campaigns on a few bus benches to spread the good news. One of the targets in this chapter is also a 30% tree canopy coverage, and this was set using a 2013 report that said Lakewood was about at 20%. We're hoping to get new data to see exactly where we are this coming year. But in the meantime, our Parks Division is well on its way. It's over 2016 and to date in 2017, it's already planted 150 trees on city property. So they're making moves. All right, last chapter is transportation. The two goals in this chapter focus on sustainable infrastructure, how we construct our streets, streetlights, as well as shifting towards a multimodal transportation community. Of the 8 strategies, 6 have been initiated. And several of those are involve the Lakewood Bicycle Advisory Team. If there's some bicycle activity, you probably can, bet the LBAT's behind it, or at least in partnership with it. So in this past year, we had a bike valet at Earth Day, several group rides, bicycle safety courses are being taught in some of our, community facilities, as well as to drivers. It's a new program as well. We were also growing our building bicycle infrastructure. Our first buffered bikeway was constructed painted at the Denver West area. And then if you peek right outside the window, past the shades with your X-ray vision, there are the employee bike share, which was rolled out probably at the end of the fall. It's 6 bikes, and employees can hop on for free for a relaxing ride outside, or to get to a meeting or to lunch. So that program we're hoping will grow and expand to other city facilities to provide that connection. The Save the Zone initiative, as in Save the Ozone, was launched earlier this year in partnership with Bicycle Colorado. The program is an education and encouragement program aimed to improve air quality by reducing the number of trips in single occupancy vehicles that folks take. So instead opting for the bus, bike, light rail, carpooling, walking. And since the program launched in the spring, as of June 1st, participants had already logged over 1,000 trips and totaling nearly 8,000 miles. So there's a lot of positive activity already happening in that area. All right. And then in this chapter, the 2 targets that we want to talk about focus on each of the 2 goals. The first target is to convert all of our streetlights to high-efficiency lighting technologies. So that's LED lighting. In just a year and a half, we've nearly doubled our city-owned LED streetlights, so definitely made some progress. However, there are still nearly 8,000 Excel-owned non-LED streetlights. So we understand that in order to achieve this goal, it's going to require continued conversations and collaboration with Excel to find a way to transfer those over. The other target that focuses on the other part of our goal around multimodal transportation is the vehicle miles traveled reduction. This is another opportunity where the data threw us for a little bit of a loop. We're excited to receive the new DRCOG travel models for 2015. And with those numbers compared to the 2010 travel models, we found that 8% decrease. However, when we dug a little bit deeper, we realized, and they informed us, that the travel models had changed, the methodology had changed, and so it isn't quite fair to compare those 2 numbers apples to apples. So we're in discussions with them now to try to revise that 2010 number and make a more accurate percentage so we can actually vet that 8% and see what that really looks like. So another way that we're just trying to continue to improve and work with our partners, when it's data coming from an external source that's changing methodology that we aren't completely sure about, we just need to continue to work with them, and we have some great partners over there to do so. All right, so we've gotten through all 7 chapters, and as by evident of all these stories and these metrics, there's a lot of really positive activity happening in Lakewood. 48 of those 63 implementation strategies have been initiated. I bolded and underlined that word because it's very key. Initiated does not mean completed. There's a lot of, in each of those implementation strategies, it usually starts with an introductory statement followed by several steps. These can be ongoing, maybe it's just a check mark, but it is a multi-step strategy. So just for a quick example, that Energy and Water Resource Center, which we have repeated multiple times to you, starts with the introductory statement. And then the first step is to gather and distribute information on available education resources, assessments and audits, technical and design support, rebates, tax incentives, and finance mechanisms. So I think we can safely say we've checked that off. It's going to be ongoing as those resources change. We've made progress there. But the second step is what our work ahead looks like, providing supportive services to facilitate the use of resources. So what we have ahead of us is, what does that look like for Lakewood? Is it providing site plan review to make sure that people know the resources available to them to design energy and water efficient sites? Is it staffing the phone, providing over-the-counter services, technical advisory support? Those are the next steps that we're going to have to figure out and understand what kind of resources that would take to implement that. And then the last step just kind of goes to prove that this is a cross-cutting strategy, that this strategy can kind of be implemented in a number of different chapters. So this strategy is not done yet, it's just initiated, but we're definitely looking forward to continuing to implement the plan. So with that, I'd like to thank you so much for giving us time to update you on the 2nd annual Sustainability Plan annual report. Before I wrap up, I do want to completely acknowledge the rest of the staff across the organization that contributed to the development of this report, and then staff efforts, community efforts across the city that have led us to progress towards our implementation of the plan. And thank you all for your support as well of sustainability in Lakewood. We really appreciate it. We'll continue to track our progress, and we encourage everyone to follow along by signing up for our newsletter, following us on social media, and just exploring our web pages, which I'll leave up on that slide as I hand it back over to you all to ask questions. Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Thank you both. That's a lot of great information. You flew through a lot of slides, a lot of initiatives going. So I'll just make a couple comments, and then we have quite a few folks that want to jump in. So I'd like to say that the nice thing about this plan is there's something in it for everyone, right? I think it's allows people to get involved in an area that they feel comfort with, and sometimes a sustainability plan can be very daunting, and sustainability might be different, in my opinion, to what somebody else up here might think. So it really breaks it down, and it looks for ways that the community can really engage, and I appreciate that. I did like the 45% increase in engagement. That's great. We'd love to see that keep going. And then you probably don't have an answer for this, but I'd say, we've increased the tree canopy 30% and added about 150 trees. We've also been kind of thinning our population of emerald ash trees or ash trees because of the emerald ash borer. Does that play into it? Are we trying to kind of compensate for that, or are they just two separate? Because I know we have quite a few in our inventory.
Sure. So just to clear, so the target date by 2025 is that 30% tree canopy coverage. That 2013 baseline was 20%, and we don't have new data beyond that to see how the thinning of those trees has factored into that. If that answers.
Yeah, that helps. And let's see here. So that's all I have. So I'm going to go to Counselor Ms. Vincent.
Thank you. A lot of people here talked about bikes and greenhouse emissions and alternative transportation. We've had RTD talking specifically about the W line several times, and I did not know if you could if you have any day, I have a theory just from taking it from multiple years and taking the bus that every time the schedule changes or they say that there's not enough ridership, the ridership goes down. We lose people each time. I also didn't know if any talks were done. If you've ever taken specifically the light rail, there's 2 bikes that are allowed. I've seen people not be able to get on light rail. I've seen a fight break out one time and a guy throw a bike across because it was like 2 trains that passed and he was getting a little frustrated. And also, you have people who are within a walkable distance, and I know Mayor Paul's heard me say this before. So they're within a walkable distance of a light rail station, but it's dark. There's no sidewalks. It's a safety concern. So what I have seen neighbors do is they'll walk, perhaps in the summer, up to the station, but then when it starts getting dark, they get either in their cars, drive to work, or they get in their cars and drive up to the light rail station, the park and ride. And I didn't know if you had any information or any thoughts around how these things are all kind of interwoven. You want to do things, but if people don't feel safe, they can't get their bikes on the light rail, you reduce bus service. People generally don't want to go the extra mile. If I have to wake up at 5:30 to take a bus instead of 6, I'm getting in my car. Okay. So I didn't know if you had any information around that sort of thing, or if we could maybe capture that. If that's a long question.
Sure, and hopefully I can answer a couple pieces of it. The first one is regarding the ridership data. We did receive data from RTD for this year. However, we noticed a pretty big discrepancy from last year, and weren't confident in comparing again kind of the apples to apples, and so we're again working with them to kind of peel through that data. It was a very hefty file, but they did notice that there was overall system-wide a slight decrease in ridership that they didn't attribute what the causes were. So there's potential for that. Regarding the bike facilities on the trains, I've definitely noticed that as well. And all I can say to that, I haven't heard directly from RTD, but with their new trains that they're opening, the G line and the commuter rail, they're switching how they do bikes on trains. They're having more of racks where you can hang it up. And so that might be a lesson learned that they've taken into account. That would maybe be one input. And then for the safety to walkable stations, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. That's going to be a multi-pronged approach. I think a lot of people are going to have to get together, our own, city staff working with RTD. I'm not sure of any particular assessments that are looking at that right now, but I'm definitely aware of that. Thank you.
Ms. Franks.
Thanks, Mayor Paul. Wanted to thank you for a wonderful presentation. This is a very passionate area of mine. I'm a recycler and a composter and an e-biker and all of those things. Wanted to make the comment that I make all the time is that I would love to see one day that the Quail Street facility goes back to single stream. I think folks who have smaller homes and who live in apartments, it's very challenging for them they can't store the multiple bins at home, and then when they have to stand out there in the heat or the rain or the snow and sort. So I know it came at a cost, and I know it was probably eliminated due to that, but I wanted to comment about that. Also wanted to make sure those in the audience and watching know that recently the state, there was a law change where you could do water catchment. And I think that folks they heard over, Colorado was one where you could not capture the rainwater that fell on your roof, and now you can. And so I want to make sure people know about that. Also wanted to let folks know that, folks who want to keep greenery and xeriscaping, please don't let the lawn be the thing that you're staying with green. I can show pictures. I've got a lush backyard that's filled with evergreen ground covers, and it's green nearly year round, and so there's ways to do that. Did want to comment that on RTD, and I haven't followed up with them recently, but they were not permitting e-bikes. So my particular bike wouldn't be allowed on the train. Now, whether they've changed that, I can certainly look into that. But when I was first doing that, they said that e-bikes were not allowed. I think that's going to be something they need to look at over time. And the last thing I wanted to comment on is there's also good programs like on Nextdoor, where if you're unsure how to start something, like you want to do a rain barrel and you're not sure how to do a diverter, reach out through like Nextdoor and other things. There's tons of people out there, beekeepers who want to help, people who are doing sustainable gardening, people who are doing composting. There's so many resources out there, and if you have any questions, feel free just to shoot me a note. I'd be happy to try to connect you to folks. So thank you, and thank you guys again for a great presentation.
Thank you. Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. So I always feel so energized after a meeting like this. So thank you to everyone who gave public comment and everything that you're doing in your own homes. And thank you to staff. That is an incredible amount of information. So very exciting to see all the progress that we are making. And I also do want to thank all of the departments for working on these issues, because when we have things like bike lanes, for example, that's in Public Works. And so it really is a whole citywide effort. So a couple of comments. One is, so I loved the public comments about the marketing campaign, and someone specifically mentioned the Don't Mess with Texas, Councilman Abel. And I was wondering, have we ever had a concerted kind of coordinated effort around recycling in the city of Lakewood?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we have resources on some of our web pages that will direct folks to different resources that are available, but we've never, that's been more passive, like, folks coming to the city to get information. And we've probably done a handful of posts on our social media from time to time, but we've never, at least since I've been involved, put together any kind of specific outreach campaign.
Okay, awesome. And so I saw there were a couple of slides that highlight the residential trash. We saw improvements in efficiency in both energy sectors and transportation sector, but we saw, I don't want to say decrease in efficiency in waste, but waste did not improve and the emissions increased. So I do see this as a area for opportunity. And people mentioned kind of that creating that culture to make it cool to recycle. So I would like to ask council to to support, or I'd like to propose that we direct staff to initiate a marketing campaign, a coordinated campaign, kind of like we did with Poo in the Parks. Sorry. And to really see if we can generate a positive culture and city pride around recycling, and just encouraging people to recycle in their own homes or going to Quail Street, because there's also a lot of people that don't even know that we have Quail Street. So that's my proposal, is that we do just a marketing campaign around encouraging people to recycle at home. A couple other things, though, other comments. I think it's really exciting to see how many people are increased in the subscriptions and all the different newsletters. And then I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about what the Excel LED streetlight process is like, to try to get those to, because I know they own them, but
have fun.
I'm not going to try to get into all those details.
Okay.
I'd probably be better to talk to our traffic engineering division and get back to you. At a high level, I can say that it's been a topic of discussion for a number of years, and there's been some potential programs offered that maybe didn't meet all of the needs of the city in one way or another, issues over maybe ownership and cost and who was taking what burden and the type of hardware being used. I think there's a variety of issues, so we can follow back up. But so it is important to us that's a huge opportunity, but it's also a very large system. So the solution needs to be carefully thought out and organized and have all parties on board. we'll follow back up.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll make this just my last comment is I think it's really exciting to include the sustainable development standards when we're updating our building code, because there is tremendous amount of opportunity to make our buildings more water and energy efficient. And that's really important to me that we do that with our new development. So I'd like to support that. Okay, I will leave it at that, even though I have quite a bit more to say. As you all know, this is one of the most important issues to me, but I'll spare you. So thank you. But please support the marketing.
So we'll come back to that, and we can I want to get through everybody's first round, and then we can come back and we can talk. There might be some other things that the council would like to bring forward. So next up, I have Councilor Wickman.
A couple questions. Very early on, you had a slide. I think it was like either admissions or greenhouse or whatever. And overall, the goal was that we were down a certain amount, I don't know, 6% or something like that. And then there was 3 components. And 2 of the components were showing decreases, but the last component was showing an increase of 21%. I didn't understand, what was that category?
Thank you. It included a couple of different inputs, landfill emissions. So when we actually just, the methane generated out of landfills, food purchases, cement use, treated drinking water, so emissions from all of those activities that really focus on consumption activities. So those are a little bit harder to measure, but we can kind of base it on folks' activity, food purchases, and economic data and inputs like that. It's a great question, though.
There was a lot of reduction goals, and those were all very laudable. Now, my question is, how did you pick those goals, and how were they calculated? My question specifically is, what sort of population were you using? Were you using the static population of the city as it is now, or were you incorporating some population increases in the near future? And if so, what sort of population increases were you anticipating?
When I talk about our emission reduction targets, when we built the calculators with Lotus Engineering was our consultant, leading up to the adoption of the plan, we did include a population growth percentage. My recollection is we assumed a 2% per year growth, so that we were on the high side, but I haven't looked at that number in a while, so it might have been 1.5%. I can get back to you with the specific, but we absolutely created a business as usual baseline and then a projected future baseline so that we could model. I mean, you can't make a 10-year plan, as you're pointing out, without assuming there's going to be population growth. So we based it on a combination of historic and projected future growth, and it is included in those calculations.
How many vehicles right now does the city own and operate? In round numbers, in general.
I think if I can calculate, between 600 and 700 vehicles, but I'd have to double check with our street maintenance manager too.
And of that, how many are electric?
We have 5 alternative fuel vehicles, so 2 are electric and 3 are the Prius hybrids right now, so less than 1%.
Yeah, that seems incredibly low. Obviously, other than police cars and snowplows, what are we doing to convert every vehicle at some point to electric?
Sure. So since each division is responsible for their own replacement and vehicle selection process, there's 2 approaches that we can take. One is creating citywide standards to increase fuel efficiency or electric vehicle requirements for each department. Another approach that the Sustainability Division has taken for some of these other projects is working with other cities around through our networks to do bulk purchasing of electric vehicles. So we're looking into that and researching what kind of cost savings we might have to make it a little bit more attractive to each division as they make their own decisions. So there's a couple pathways that we're looking into right now. That bulk purchasing is one that we're actively looking into.
Okay. Last question is,
I was just going to tag on a little bit to that. I think one of the challenges with converting vehicles is the range of different type of vehicles that each city division may have a different set of needs with their vehicles. And so while there are a growing and quickly growing number of electric vehicles in the marketplace, part of this challenge that we can work with other cities is to match the right vehicle to the purpose so that we can alleviate some of the concern for the folks that have maybe always been driving a certain type of truck, that this electric vehicle will be a suitable replacement. So that's something else I think ahead of the transition falls into our court to do that research, find out how other cities are addressing that, so we can come up with that suite of options, and that should help us. Thanks.
All right, well, I just hope that we be aggressive on that. Final question is on recycling. We've in the past recognized the need to have more recycling centers in addition to Quail. We making any progress on getting additional centers?
Last time I spoke to the Environmental Services Division, they have the resources to service the visitors that are attending their site now, and no plans that I'm aware of to expand that center.
Well, again, I'd suggest we get more aggressive about that. Okay, thank you.
To follow, our big trucks are biodiesel though, correct?
I believe
Like our
so. I'd want
snowplows
to
and-
verify. We've been running on biodiesel for a lot of years. I'm not sure if the current fuel mix has changed at all, but that was something we actually were very early adopters on.
Yeah, because that could play into that number. I mean, 5 is pretty low. Okay, I have Ms. Harrison.
Thank you. A good share of my questions have been answered, but what a wonderful presentation. And I think it really speaks highly of the city of Lakewood. I just had one thing that I wanted to compliment you on, comments from Ward 5 residents. They absolutely love the yard waste that just magically turns into mulch a few weeks later. And it really is the true example of recycling. You take it in big sticks in your truck on 1 week, and 2 weeks later you go back and it's all mulch and ready for your yard. So keep the good work up. Thank you.
Mr. Abel?
I have a couple of questions. I like the fact that we're promoting farm to table, and that there is, I think I saw number 37 farms and CSA, community supported agriculture operations in the city. And I think we should do everything we can to encourage more. That's farming's a traditional use in Lakewood. But I have talked to some folks who are pursuing that very thing, and they have a couple of concerns. One of them is about greenhouses, and we've talked about this before, Jonathan. The only thing, and Travis, the only thing I can find in our zoning ordinance about greenhouses addresses greenhouses in community gardens and limits them to 10 by 12 feet by 10 feet high. Is there something further in code? I've been told that our standard on the R value of the glass used in greenhouses makes them very, is a high expectation and makes them almost cost prohibitive. Is that in code, or is that in the zoning ordinance someplace that I haven't been able to find?
So our zoning ordinance treats greenhouses the same as other accessory structures. So they're allowed, and we allow horticulture as an accessory use in most residential zones. The issues that you're talking about, though, I think are building code issues.
Okay.
And so those are not things covered in our zoning code, and I'm not familiar with how we implement them.
Well, that's one of my concerns. I think we should make it much easier for greenhouse. In our climate, it's difficult to raise a garden anyway, and with a greenhouse, you can stretch it by a couple of months. On a related issue, one not quite so nice, manure is a very inexpensive fertilizer, and it provides a lot of nitrogen. And it can also provide potassium and phosphorus, but not in great amounts. However, we have a regulation that says you can't spread or till manure into the ground for fertilizer unless it's composted or aged. I understand that, but then we have a restriction that says you can only, that manure piles must be removed from the property at a minimum of once every 7 days. So how does manure age if you can't leave it there longer than a week? Thank you. Yeah, I know mine manure. The point is there some way we can relax that a bit to accommodate it, or do you have any remedy for that?
Actually, I have a little experience with manure, and that's because a couple years ago is when we came back and actually allowed any of it to be put back in the soil, and that was by changing the language. We worked with code enforcement that had some concerns over allowing it to be composted, and so we reached out to Cooperative Extension to try to figure out the right language and how we could encourage some of that proper, composting of the manure to get it back on the property. So these other things you're pointing out are clearly issues if you're going to have that process taking place that it probably we weren't aware of. So I think if we could get those documented, like specifically what those limitations are, then we'd be happy to go talk to code enforcement and see, if there's a way to come up with a remedy. I don't know if there is. I don't know what the other, concerns might be, but certainly seems reasonable to look at it.
That's in Ordinance 2015-4, page 12, item B. Secondly, or lastly, to Councilwoman's Gutwein's mention of the "Don't Mess with Texas" bumper stickers. I think I'm going to have some printed up that say "Don't mess with Councilman Abel." Thank you.
Mr. Roybal.
Thank you. One thing that came to mind for me, and thank you for the presentation, it's fantastic. The city practice what it preaches, and it tries to as much as we can. I'm referring to our city buildings. And I believe we have been doing that for the last 15, 20 years with new technologies coming in, but I don't know where we stand on it. Would it be possible next time we have a presentation that you can possibly include the city buildings and what we've been doing to update and encourage recycling as far as new technologies in buildings, the heating systems, the lighting systems, new different ideas. And I think people need to know, we practice what we preach. So I figured I'd bring that up to you and kind of mention that, so next time we have a presentation, we can also include that. But great presentation. Thank you.
Ms. Shakti.
Thank you for the presentation, and it was fun to see all the excitement at the beginning about what people are doing. I agree. I'm interested in hearing about the marketing idea and if you think that would work and how much it would cost and that kind of thing. I'm also interested in, so the two areas in trash, we weren't meeting our diversion goals. And then in, and I know that we have some ongoing conversations there. And then in energy makeup, we are meeting our goals, or we're in that direction at least, which is great. And we get to thank Representative Tyler and the people at the state level for helping us achieve that. Is there any more we could do? Like, what are our next steps for the city to be taking action to make that happen? And I'll just go through and then you can answer all of them. Does that make sense? In terms of, I agree with Councilman Wickman's conversation about electric vehicles and how can we have more. And one of the things that I think we can do more, but one of the realities is a lot of our vehicles are police cars. And I don't know Tesla, but I feel like we need to get the word out that we need good electric police cars that can meet those specifications, because if you look at local jurisdictions across the country, there are a lot of them. So, and then in terms of manure, I think it's really important that we be able to compost manure, and it was one of my constituents had a similar complaint, and that's why we worked on the language before. And if it needs more work, we should continue those conversations. Thanks.
Okay.
You have good, tough questions there. So I guess I'll respond to the energy question first. I think it's a really good question. I'm not sure we know exactly the pathway. If Xcel as a utility, or any of the state utilities hits 30% and decides that's good enough with their renewables and doesn't proceed, it'll be a challenge for us. So I think right now we're not at that point. The economics certainly seem to be favoring bringing on more renewables. There's other issues, of course, as well. So I think the first step is engaging with Xcel to ask them, what their plans are, and to make it clear that we have our community goals. And I think we took a step, council did recently, to do that. And when the time comes, I think what's really important is that we just make sure that whatever takes place is additive to the whole system. So we want to make sure that if we bring more solar into Lakewood, it's not because they've reserved a certain percentage of what they already have to bring online for their entire territory and just make it available for Lakewood residents. That might, be beneficial just to Lakewood, but on the big picture, that's not making anything change. So I think we need to have those conversations. We need to make sure that this, how we move forward is additive and is beneficial to Lakewood, that it's saving people money and keeps things affordable. And I think if we can make that clear, hopefully we've come up with some solutions. And there's a lot of partner entities out there working on that. We just met recently with Grid Alternatives, which is a great nonprofit that works to get solar capacity for a renewable or for a lower income household. So there's a lot of entities we can partner with to try to move that forward.
And we're moving forward with those conversations.
Yes. Yep. To the electric vehicles, and we should have mentioned this. Councilor Wickman brought it up, but one of the benefits of those regional groups working within a network is the Climate Mayors Group, as part of their effort, actually just issued an RFP. I think there's about 30 plus cities involved, the major cities, and this was instigated by the city of Los Angeles that wants to have 100% electric vehicle fleet for their police vehicles. It's basically just an initial request out to the manufacturers to say what would happen if, what could you do for 115,000 vehicles, which is what we're added up. That's about $10 billion of potential investment. So part of the benefit of Lakewood being part of these coalitions is that as these innovative approaches and technologies come out, it's a big investment for a community. But if we have the power of watching other communities and joining with them, then we can benefit from what we find out happens with that RFP. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Thank you. That's exciting. I have been talking for a couple years to people about this, and that's the most optimistic response I've heard yet. So,
did we get all your questions? Okay.
Great. So I want to just touch on a couple things that I heard. One is actually great news, and that is the partnership that we have with Xcel Energy. And a few months ago, some folks came to council and urged us to send a letter to Xcel, which we did. And we actually had a really favorable response. And we don't really know exactly what it is, but they would like to have a serious conversation with the city of Lakewood on how we can better meet our goals, how we could be a pilot type program or be a city that can team with them. And that meeting is going to take place, I think, next week to start to begin that conversation with Xcel. So that's fantastic. And the streetlights issue too, they are kind of coming around. I think in the early days, they were pretty prescriptive of what they expected, and our folks didn't quite agree, but I think that's changing. I'll tell you, they would also rather see us own all those streetlights than them, and that's a big cost for the city. So we may just keep that there. Slash site is something that has been ongoing. We've tucked money away in the budget. That's always a challenge, but that's something that this city desperately needs as a organic waste site to be able to drop tree limbs and things like that. So we've been working for basically since the Rooney Road Center closed to try to find a location that's suitable for that. And then newsflash, last but not least for me, especially because it's campaign season, we're not going to do a single hauler trash program. Just so everybody knows. That's not going to happen. Some people want it, some people don't, but you heard it here. You are the witnesses. You did not hear a recommendation from staff that we're going to go to single hauler trash, but I think it's absolutely a great opportunity for us to talk trash and to continue to talk trash and look at the recycling. And then two quick things. So for Councilor Franks and Councilor Wickman, as far as quail goes, I think if you want to look at different things as we approach the budget season, that's a great opportunity to talk to staff and see what that looks like and talk to the different folks. And then I would certainly support Councilor Gutwein's idea to do some marketing like we did. What was the name of the program? Do your job, I think. Do your part. Nobody knows what it was called, but it was really cool. And I think it was somewhat inexpensive. So, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of hesitated to speak, but I'm going to. First, your presentation was awesome. Thank you. But more than your presentation, I want to thank the people that came out tonight to speak. Your enthusiasm and your passion are contagious. Thank you. All of this talk tonight has kind of made me think about there's been conversation that this generation now, the millennials, are a disposable generation. And that's not really very complimentary to you. Because when I listen to you tonight, that is surely not where the generation is coming from. But I also think that we have come full circle and can listen to where our seniors, those folks from the Depression and World War II that are still around, we can learn from them. Let me give you an example. What was it, about 15 years ago when we actually started buying water in plastic bottles? I thought, really? You got to be kidding. But it sells. We all buy it. You know what? When I was a little girl, we used to actually iron our Christmas wrap and tissue paper to reuse again. There was kind of an expression in our home that you make it do or do without. Perhaps some of you have heard that. My husband, when he was in high school, and I'm giving our ages away, he made a wooden darner for his mother. It's kind of a stick with a round ball, and you put your sock in it, and you can darn socks. Frankly, I think if somebody saw that today, they would think it was some type of a rattle for a child. They really wouldn't understand what it was. When I was little, we used to burn trash. You know, I don't remember trash trucks on our street, frankly. Of course, we've done away with incinerators, and I'm not saying that all these things are something that we should go back to. But we can kind of learn from some of the values that were ahead of us. When my sweet little grandma died and I was cleaning out her apartment, there was a bag like this of bread wraps. She wouldn't have thought to have tossed those out. Now that I have a little grandchild, I'm understanding the widespread use of paper diapers. When my children were growing up, we always had cloth. And the kids don't think anything about buying the wipes for the kids. I don't know. I don't think you can even put them down a toilet. I don't know how they disintegrate, but you go through a lot of them. When I was a little girl, I had one pair of shoes. That's actually not the case now. We walked more. I walked 1.5 miles to high school every day, and frankly, you didn't think anything about it. You know, kids now really want to take cars more. It's kind of a rite of passage, if you will. I can remember as a little girl having this funny little gadget in the kitchen, and it looked like a strainer, only it was enclosed and it had a handle. You put your the little pieces of soap that you didn't use in there, you soaked it in water, and that's how you got your liquid soap for your dishes. I don't know if any of you remember those or see those. We reused our aluminum. We never threw it out. You wrapped it up, you put it back in the drawer. All of our milk came in milk bottles. We didn't have it coming in paper. And actually, since my orientation is health, when I was in nursing school, when the earth was cooling, we had glass syringes. I mean, you didn't have plastic and disposable ones. I'm not saying we should go back to those, but they were sanitized. There was also a little gentleman that used to sharpen the needles to reuse them. Things have changed, and in most ways they're good. We've come a long way, but I think we can still learn from some of those values from the past generation of what it means to actually not be so wasteful, so we don't have to recycle as much. And I am so appreciative and grateful to hear the young people come here tonight and talk about recycling and a sustainable environment. God bless you and thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison.
I just had one more question that I needed to ask. Air quality. Would you add fire pits and the issues that fire pits are bringing? We have more and more questions in Ward 5 where people with breathing difficulties live right next door to somebody with a fire pit. It really becomes an issue, especially with the high use of swamp coolers in the city of Lakewood. So if we could look at that as well, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Could you clarify that? Do you mean just to look at complaints or?
I would like to know if we have an increase in the number of fire pit usages the way I think we do, because they're becoming kind of vogue. Does that affect our air quality in the city of Lakewood, and is that of concern enough to where we want to look at maybe some ordinances that might have to do with fire pits? I don't know how far we want to take it, but I think first step would be to track what it's doing to our air quality and if it's an issue. Maybe complaint based? I don't know how we can do that exactly.
So let's come back to that, and maybe we can add that to what Dana has brought up and see if there's consensus. 'Cause I thought that we just had some information that came out about that, as well as potentially an ACIC report. So maybe we can let's look in the archives. I think we have some past information. Okay. Ms. Shakti.
I just wanted to add to the fire pit discussion the ozone alert day data, and I don't know how that might play in, but I think maybe Denver, there are certain days when you can't burn, and is that information very prominent on our site and that kind of thing?
All right. So going forward, there was a request from Council Member Gutwein to look at that. Is there consensus to direct that by the group? I'm sorry, to direct staff to look at some sort of marketing program to promote recycling, to increase that. So there you go. And then the other one had to do with the fire pit, so we'll try to find that, if that's cool. All right. Any other? Yes, Mr. Abel.
When we're looking at fire pits, perhaps we could talk to West Metro about the incidents of out of control fires, grass fires, garage fires that result from the use of those things.
Yep. Thank you for that, sir. And I'm almost positive we saw something come across from West Metro, but we'll figure it out.
They gave input.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had brought it up.
That's the microphone.
I brought it up 2 years ago, and it wasn't addressed, and it went to ACIC, and there were some complaints, and West Metro came and talked about what it is you can do when there's an issue around fire pits.
And I think it settled on just trying to be a good neighbor and try to have those communications with your neighbors. Okay, anything else pertaining to this presentation? All right, I will reopen public comment, and Ms. Peters, you're first up. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. For those who don't know me, my name's Rhonda Peters. I'm a resident of Ward 4, and I am a sustainability enthusiast. I think a lot of folks know that. Green Mountain recently became one of the sustainable neighborhoods in that program, and I participated in that process as one of the founding members. I use the Quail Street recycling facility. I compost not just my own food waste, but I accept compost from my neighbors as well. So look me up if you want to. So in the discussion about sustainability, there's a number of things I want to comment on, and I think there's some things that we're really doing right, and I think there's some areas that maybe we can do a little bit more, and I think there's some areas where we're really falling short. So it's going to be a little bit of a mix. In the sustainability report, I have to say that there were 2 pages that were my favorite pages, so I'm going to start with one of those. I really appreciated the zero waste page, where on page 30, where it was discussed about the Lakewood Cider Days. I know that in 2016, the Earth Day Fair didn't occur, but that would have been slated to be another zero waste event. I'm assuming that it was this year in 2017. I think we need to do a lot more of that, and we need to encourage vendors and other folks that put on community events to do that. So I'm thankful that we have that, but it still, I hope that it will go a little further. On the trash hauling and recycling, I think one of the critical areas is that we need to find a way to facilitate recycling in the apartments and composting. That's where a lot of residents already live. We're adding people at an unprecedented rate, unlimited growth into these apartments, and there's no way we can meet our sustainability goals if we aren't targeting those people in particular. So I think that's something that we need to be thinking about. It was brought up also that we need to look at development to be near public transit, and also discussion about incentives to recycle and encourage that. It is concerning that you can put unlimited garbage, but you have to pay an extra cost for recycling. And none of these haulers will accept just recycling without a trash service. So as somebody suggested, I think it was in the report, 75% of the residents supported allowing residents who produce less trash to pay at a lower rate. Maybe the city can offer some incentives and help facilitate that. I'm going to have to move quickly here. So in the unsustainable area, I definitely, like some of the other commenters, I'm very concerned about the lack of limit on development and the rate of development that's occurring. I'm not going to cover the points that have already been discussed, but I am concerned about development in high-risk floodplains recognized by FEMA, such as in the Rooney Valley area. It was discussed today how increased and unpredictable climate change events and the rapid melt that comes from the mountains, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It is not sustainable to build in those areas. We also need to look at how water is acquired for new development. I'm not sure, I would assume a lot of folks are aware that Denver Water and in a lot of places, they buy farmland to get the water rights. And that's how they're able to increase the population, to increase these, the development and to have more water. That's not sustainable, taking the food away. So I would really hope that you folks here would look closely at that for new development. The growth rate, it was mentioned about schools, and I think we need to know, everybody understands that the voters have to approve tax increases through Jefferson County to be able to pay for those new students. But when they come in at too rapid of a rate, it's a real severe hardship for the schools, and sometimes those increases don't get voted for, and even if they do, it's a delay. This is a real issue in sustainability. Okay, so going back to my next favorite page, natural systems. Goats eating the knapweed and thistle at Green Mountain Hayden Park, that was excellent. The other thing, 4 parks are not using chemicals. Herbicides to help promote the Be Safe. I'd like to come here next year or whenever the next report is and see that to be 100%. And if you do use pesticides, please be aware of when the pollinators are out so that you don't spray when they're really vulnerable, like when they're getting food just when they're coming out right after hibernation or they're looking for food going in. I have to wrap up. I'd have a lot more to say, but I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Amara? Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, all. Good evening. Being conscious and a conscientious steward of this planet is at the core of who I am and much of what I do in the world for my business. Some of you have asked where my passion comes to speak at these meetings on a variety of somewhat heated topics we've had over the last 2 years. It comes from that. It is about being a responsible steward of the planet, of the community, of the little plot that you've been entrusted with, whether you bought it, whether you rent it, whether you're borrowing it. Whether you're in a municipality like ours, a high-dense suburb, or the rural areas. Many of you know I've lived in large cities across the world at various times. Most of you don't know that where I moved here from is being an innholder in the northern end of the Rockies, in the mountains, isolated on a 110-acre 1911 patented mining claim, in a cabin with no electricity and no running water. I learned the meaning of sustainability. It is not a feel-good option there. It is survival when you are alone in that wilderness. You appreciate the things in life we take for granted, like hot running water and food and good weather. A particularly pleasurable but simple experience one day when I was walking was to stumble across an old, hand-hammered, blacksmith-made nail from the turn of the century, not this century, but the 1800s on my land. It was so precious to me to look at this and realize what people sweat and sacrificed and suffered for a nail. And quite frankly, I was delighted too, because at that moment I needed a nail. I needed a hook in my cabin on which to hang my hat and my coat. And there wasn't an extra hook around, and here I found one from the 1800s. That's the respect for our resources that I brought with me when I moved to Lakewood and chose this place in which to settle and raise my daughter. And that's what drives me in concern for all aspects of our city and its development now. It's why I appreciate the individual tasks discussed here, like recycling and community gardens and light bulbs. But the individual tasks cannot substitute for an unsustainable form of development, which is our present form of Lakewood's development. Overbuilding is not sustainable. Overbuilding buildings that are built with outdated energy forms and structural standards is not sustainable. Over-congesting our limited surface roads so that we increase the pollutants spewed into the air, and we prohibit or discourage alternative forms of transportation because it's not safe to ride your bicycle to work because of the congestion. It's not safe to let your child walk on the streets because of the congestion and the high-speed traffic. Over-densifying to spew more trash into our local environment because we allow building without accommodation for efficiency or sustainability or recyclability or conservation is not sustainable. Developing without regard for the scarcity of our particularly local resource, water, is not sustainable. You cannot say a private company is going to truck it in and not have a disaster in the next big drought and the Western water wars that are coming. A city that builds commercial and residential developments in 2017 without minimal renewable energy standards and higher standards of structural build requirements is a city whose development is outdated before the certificates of occupancy are even granted. And we've had too many of those in 2016 and 2017 with proud ribbon cuttings in this city that make me embarrassed to think, with all the conscious people in this town, we are still making that kind of building. Lakewood cannot continue to parse out sustainability as a separate task from building codes, ordinances, and an overall comprehensive plan and smart growth strategic building design. I thank you for considering adding minimal renewable energy requirements and true sustainability into the upcoming discussions of building codes and ordinances and the growth plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that exhausts the roster. Mr. Skilling?
I'll be brief, although I know we all like the 10:30 meetings and all. David Skilling, Ward 4 resident. I was reading through the table of contents, climate change and energy and water and sustainable economy, zero waste, community cohesion, public health, natural systems, and transportation. And these are some of the issues that I think a lot of the residents in my ward are concerned about. And in the last meeting, we heard what I consider an attack on some of our residents that have gone to, admittedly, might be extreme measures, whether that's moratoriums or growth initiatives or what have you. We're not all wealthy classists who think that we're going to keep out the poor people. That's not who we are. We're concerned about these things in the table of contents. And I hope that the council keeps this booklet with them when our friends that come before this council, maybe in the next few months, and want to build 1,100 new homes or whatever the count is now. And they want to do ask Lakewood to annex in all of that land, and we're going to have thousands of new residents. And there is no conceivable way that a project like that meets the goals that you all love and we love and everyone in this room loves. It's not possible. So with that, I hope that we keep that in mind when those folks come before you and ask for your blessing in building that project. Secondly, and lastly, I saw, speaking of Morrison, they wrote a June 15, 2017 letter to Jefferson County regarding the new site plan up by Dino Ridge. I don't know much about it, the new site plan, other than what I read in this letter, but they did write a referral letter discussing things that Morrison would like to see on that property, even though it is Jeffco. So we're talking about the northwest by Dino Ridge and then the southwest. They want to now put warehouses and office space. Morrison, in their last paragraph, they say that the land has always been vacant, thus a warehouse/office development of this scale has potential to have significant impacts in regards to traffic, noise, visual appearance, and valuable historic and cultural resources of the valley. The town encourages Jefferson County to require detailed technical studies that address these impacts and ensure the proposal achieves sustainable and responsible development that is cohesive with the overall vision for Rooney Valley. So lastly, I would ask that this council write a similar letter or instruct staff or whoever writes these fun letters and express the same sentiments that Morrison has, because if the commissioners there in Jeffco hear it from us and hear it from Morrison, they might actually do something. So with that, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Anybody else wish to speak? Yeah, come on down. Good evening. Welcome.
Charles Davis, I just wanted to give a little thing. There are a lot of statistics being tossed around about growth, and according to...
Pull the mic closer, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm tall. There are a
You
lot
did
of...
send us info on Woodsy the Owl, so thank you.
Yes, and that's important stuff. By the way, I did check. It's not in the public domain, so we can't use that for free. You know, regarding growth, the United States has grown over the last 100 years at an average rate of 1.3%, and that's the United States aggregate. Colorado, over the last 6 years, at 1.6%. Lakewood, since 2000, is at 1.22%. So we're actually below the averages for growth for both the state of Colorado and the United States as a whole. And just keep that in mind when we're talking about growth. Growth is an issue, but it's not hundreds of thousands of people coming into Lakewood. It's under the national average. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? All right, I will close. Miss Merkel. Caught me before I could spit it out.
Trish Merkel. Just to give you some information about the fire pits, because I am on the ACIC and I was involved in reviewing that proposal. So the proposal from council was to look at the smoke nuisance that's from fire pits and not for air quality. So when we looked at it, we talked with West Metro to see the complaints to West Metro from residents, but we did not look at air quality in that proposal. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? All right. I will close public comment. Thank you all very much. Thank you for all the input, all the comments. Jonathan, thank you. Lynn, you guys are fantastic, and you bring a lot of energy, and you've gotten a lot of people excited and brought together a lot of partners. So I think your Earth Day event was a smashing success. And was it zero waste? Uh-oh. Next year, Rhonda. Next year.
We reached 85% this year. Had a couple issues that we're going to iron out and hit that 90% next year.
Great. I like that. All right. Well done. Okay, so now let's go to reports, and I'm going to start all the way on my left with Ms. Shakti.
No report.
Ms. Johnson.
No report.
Mr. Abel.
I'll leave it to Councilman Roybal to discuss the flag ceremony from Saturday and the participation of our police department honor guard. Thank you.
Ms. Vincent.
No report.
Mr. Roybal.
Thank you. Real quick, we had I would say one of the most tearjerkers for me is that during World War II, there was a heated battle. Many veterans or many soldiers, Marines died in this battle. And one of the sons of Sergeant Moore was presented honors at the Lakewood High School. And they exhumed his body from one of the islands in the Pacific, had DNA tested, they brought it home, and they verified it. Now we gave him a proper presentation of honors. So I just wanted to mention that during World War II. Also, Shakti and myself are going to be having a Ward 3 meeting Saturday at Phillips United Methodist Church, but however, Shakti is not going to be there. And so I'm going to go ahead and continue with having the Ward 3 meeting to keep it going and keep our constituents coming. So that's all I have.
Ms. Harrison?
No report.
Ms. Franks? Ms. Gutwein? Mr. Wickman? Mr. Coop? Ms. Johnson, you had a report?
I just want to mention that Councilman Roybal is a little bit humble and shy, but he is actually responsible for finding this old memorial that was at Old Lakewood Junior High. It was covered with weeds. Nobody even knew it was there. There were some very distinguished names on it. You can talk about it. But Councilman Roybal is really the person responsible for getting that that large plaque out to Lakewood High School in a place of honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I have a couple things. So we had a study session on Tuesday. Well, I don't remember when it was. It was probably on a Monday because we don't meet on Tuesdays. But you all in the audience might remember, but it was on parking. And so the follow-up to that was to begin a mediated process with some folks from Jefferson County Mediation. And that meeting is going to start and kind of kick off with the stakeholders, and everybody's welcome, on June 27th at 6:30 p.m. from 6:30 to 8:30 at Lakewood High School. So that'll begin to further that conversation. We had a work session tonight to talk about our policies and procedures, which has been an ongoing subject, and kicked it off by saying a little bit painful, not really that fun, but something that definitely needs to get done. And so I think we have a good process going forward, a 3-step approach, and we'll do it in work sessions. We'll make sure it's videoed. We're going to be looking at Tuesdays or Thursdays to actually do that because our Monday nights have become quite packed. And then so the committee will meet, we'll go through the policies and procedures, or the group will meet to bring some sort of consensus to a drafting committee, which consists of Ms. Franks, Mr. Abel, Ms. Shakti, and myself, and then that will then be brought back to council as a whole in this domain to be voted on. We'll have a facilitator, and we're looking to get this going once every 2 weeks. So we really want to get this process moving and move it forward. So stay tuned for that. It'll be posted. Everything will be public. And then last but certainly not least, I just want to reemphasize, we had a conversation last week, and I think it's important, especially again hearing the conversations tonight, hearing from the community in general. You know, I had the nice opportunity to meet with every council member and try to dig in and drill into what density means to them and what that looks like. And it means a lot of different things. And so on the 26th, we'll have our housing study. That'll be the result of our housing study. It'll be a great meeting to really understand Lakewood and housing and everything in and of that. The next idea was to, talk about what I found out, and I don't think it's a surprise, but it had to do with parking limits and ratios, residential cap on multifamily, height limits and restrictions, setbacks, sustainability standards for new development, design standards, housing diversity, building space to open space, and MES language. That was originally slated to really all come together on July 17th. Council took a little bit of a different turn and wanted to discuss a different option, which is a moratorium. And then the other area of interest was kind of under the public works domain, and that was fees, impact fees, fees in lieu, sidewalks, traffic, and stormwater. So I'm hopeful that we can get maybe back onto that conversation. I think that's really the meat and potatoes of what I think the community wants. And so I encourage council to keep that in perspective and to really try to engage, I think, in